All right. Okay, very good. All right, very good. The call is not being recorded. All right. So poetry. Now the thing about poetry is that it is the most feared of the three genres of literature, in the sense that whenever poetry is um, optional, you will always find out that people will not do it. I was talking to a couple of 300 level students when they were asking me the electives they should choose, and there is a course known as Renaissance poetry, 17th century poetry, and I recommended the course to them. There were six of them. None of them agreed to do it. I'm still trying to force one of them to do it. The reason is that the moment many people hear poetry, what comes to mind is that we are dealing with something mysterious, we are dealing with something esoteric, we are dealing with something that is not meant for mere mortals. That is what many people think. You get in fact, there are so many misconceptions as regards poetry. There are a lot of misconceptions as regards poetry. I saw one time somebody said that a poet can never make heaven, and I found that quite hilarious. Not because I want to make heaven or anything. I found it hilarious because in the Bible we have lots of poets. When you read the Psalms, you would see beautiful poetry. When David was I can't remember the exact Psalms. When David said something like, my tears have been my meat day and night. Why those that mock me continue to ask, where is thy God? I can't remember the exact place. When you listen to a passage like this, you definitely know it's poetry because there is a form of there is a form of power. There is a form of like there is that mysteriousness. In few words, David was able to say something so poignant to the extent that even to this day, that particular verse has become a song. You see it a lot in so many songs. If you follow me, you might have witnessed when Arsenal was playing against PSG. I gave the Igbo version. I said, "My God, do not let the world laugh at me." I said it in Igbo. Ekwela ndị ụwa ka ọ mụọ ọnụ. You get, I put it in Igbo because I did not want people asking what is the meaning, or people. I did not want people to know exactly what I was saying. But at the end of the day, I'm just trying to tell you that poetry exists in a lot of things. In fact, when you consider the three genres of literature, you need to know that poetry is the oldest. Poetry has been from time immemorial, right from the oral traditions. In terms of the language skills, we speak before we write. You get me? We speak before we write. So long before writing was established, poetry has existed. Poetry existed through songs. Poetry existed through incantations. Poetry existed through what our oral traditions. So even if you detest poetry, the truth is that you cannot do without poetry because poetry is basically life. Emily Dickinson will say, when I read a book and feel cold, that no fire can warm me, I know it's poetry. The essence of statements like this is just trying to point out the power of poetry. Poetry is powerful. Most of the times, when you say, I don't have anything to do with poetry, most of your wedding vows, the wedding vows you give, those of you that want to get married, most of the movies you watch, the dialogue are all poetic. You might be wondering, say, no, I like Vikings. You listen to Ragnar Lothbrok trying to rouse up the Vikings. The way he speaks, that way is not the way a normal human being will speak. That's not the way you speak in normal context. That's poetry. Poetry is everywhere. You get me? So you cannot do without poetry. You cannot do without poetry. And I dare say you have to love it. Maybe not as a subject. Of course, as a subject, it could be very annoying. It could be, in fact, completely aggravating as a subject. But the truth is that as an individual, it is something you will always come across. So why not love it? So going to today's class, I'm going to be sharing my screen. The reason for this particular pattern, this is going to be the pattern we'll be using for classes henceforth. We will no longer use Clubhouse, or we would use Clubhouse but sparingly. Clubhouse will be used sparingly. So this is the pattern we're going to be using henceforth. So of course, poetry is the oldest genre of literature, and poetry has been agreed to be the most complicated. You get me? It is agreed to be the most complicated. Now there are several reasons for this complication. There are several reasons, and one of such is that poetry uses language that differs from everyday language. Poetry makes use of elevated language. Let me give you an instance. Imagine, I assume everyone here is familiar with Chibika Onu, the government driver on his retirement. Of course, you know the poem about the government driver that was sober for so many years, about 35 years when he was a driver. But the moment this driver retired, this driver decided that he was going to drink, and in the course of drinking, he died. Now, when you read this particular poem, the poem is simple, in simple diction. It's easy to follow, easy to interpret. You get, as against the belief that poetry should always be difficult. This poem is completely easy to what? Interpret. But there is something that stands out in the poem. There is something that stands out. What stands out is the use of words. For instance, instead of saying the driver owes the celebration, instead of saying he owes the celebration, the poet will say what? And a celebration he owes. I am talking to you normally now, and I come and say, and the celebration he owes. It doesn't make any sense. You look at me and like, what is this one forming like? Or what's this one feeling like? But in that particular poem, Chibika only said what? And a celebration he owes. Another part of the poem, he said what? Today retires him home. Instead of saying today he retires home. This is one of the reasons poetry is complicated, in the sense that poetry makes use of words in a way that other genres of literature may not necessarily do. So most times, poetry tries to what? Evoke a freshness of sensation, meaning they tend to what? Try to say something in a way it has never been said before. And the moment we come across these words, it becomes complicated because they might not be easy for us to easily understand. So because of this, many people are afraid of poetry. So when you look at it, you would see that poetry is complicated. It is the oldest genre of literature. And one of the reasons for this complication is what? Elevated language. The language of poetry differs from the language of prose. The way a poet will say something is different from the way what a novelist will say it. I was reading this particular collection of poetry I have. I think Roses and Rainbows. It's about COVID-19. So many poets contributed. And one of the poets that contributed was Femi Osofison. Now, I read Femi Osofison wrote his poems under a pseudonym, Okimba Lanko. I did not even know that was Femi Osofison. And so I was reading this poem, I was like, this person is so good. How is it that I have never come across this person? Because I try to believe that I know all the good poets. But I have never come across Okimba Lanko. I'm like, this person is so good. So when I Googled on Okimba Lanko, I found out that it was Femi Osofison. And I was so happy. I was so happy in the sense that I was like, oh, thank God I did not initially know it was Femi Osofison. If I had initially known it was Femi Osofison, I would have expected it to be a good poet. But because I did not know, I was able to actually see that this is a great poem. Now, when it got to when I read the entire anthology, When I got to the poems written by Akachi Ezebo is an accomplished writer, a novelist. She wrote Roses and Bullets. Yeah, Roses and Bullets, a book about the Nigerian Biafran War, and also the Last of the Strong Ones. I think she's written a lot of books. Adeshokon likes her so much. Adeshokon should tell you more about her books. When I got to the poems written by Akachi Ezebo, I knew immediately that this person is not a poet. She tried, she did the best she could do. But it was just obvious that this person is not a poet because when she was writing the poems, it felt like narration. It felt very close like. It felt very close like because that's flair for poetry. The way a poet will use words is not necessarily the way a novelist will use words. So because of this, many people find poetry complicated. You get me? Now, if you're reading a novel, let's say the novel begins in the very cliche pattern. Once upon a time, there lived a man who did not want to do poetry, blah 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 blah. The truth is that you guys will easily relate. It is easy to relate to novel characters. When I read Second Class Citizen, I I like I hate Francis because I can easily relate to the suffering of Ada. When I read The Joys of Motherhood, when I see Nnuego running at the beginning, when she wants to jump off the Kaka bridge, whenever I read, I keep praying and say, oh God, please let Nnuego actually jump so that Nnuego will not suffer the way she suffered in life. Like, we can easily relate when we read prose works. In fact, when I read any book about Nigerian Biafran civil war, I am angry for the next 1 week. There is nothing you will tell me that I would feel bad, feel embittered, and feel irritated. Because it is easy to relate to prose characters. You see them as people. Remember that the novel is realistic. You see them as people. You understand that, oh, this can happen to me. This has happened to somebody I know. This is possible. But when you read poetry, that relatability is almost lost because poetry tends to be esoteric. So poetry is the least relatable of the genres. And that is why you guys are afraid. But today I tell you guys, fear not. Now is no time to fear. This is the time for us to what? To completely, or I wouldn't say completely. This is the time for us to try to demystify it. Nobody can completely demystify poetry. I can't, you can't, your professors can't. Poetry is not is poetry is not something that you would say, oh, somebody is a master. Of course, we can all try our best. But the truth is that there are patterns. There are patterns. You can pass it. You can defeat it. You get it? So, what is poetry? Let's go. What is poetry? Now, this is where it gets a bit complicated. Poetry does not have a specific definition. In fact, many things you guys, by now, you guys would have known that in the humanities, things rarely have specific definitions. Your law, there is no specific definition. Your novels, there is no specific definition. Literature, there is no specific definition. I'm even certain that this should also obtain in politics. There is no specific or there is no universally accepted definition. So poetry is like that. You get it? Now, one of the reasons there is no universally accepted definition is that no matter the definition you give of poetry, there will surely be a poem that will what? That will debunk that definition. Like there is no definition of poetry that can completely cover what poetry entails. Let me give you an example. Um, my one of my favorite poets, Percy Bysshe Shelley. Percy Bysshe Shelley wrote Ozymandias. Sorry. Percy Bysshe Shelley wrote Ozymandias about a proud king. If you have watched that Moses Moses story on Netflix, you would see Ramesses. Ramesses is the pharaoh that dealt with Moses is most likely Ozymandias because that was like the height of Egyptian might. The time different cities were built. So that is most likely the pharaoh, the one that dealt with Moses, Ramesses. So Percy Shelley wrote Ozymandias. My name is King Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look upon my works, you mighty and despair. Wonderful poets. Now, how did Percy Shelley define poetry? Percy Shelley defined poetry by saying that what? It is the record of the happiest time, of the happiest moment of the happiest mind, something like that. A record of the what? Happiest moment of the happiest mind. Meaning that poetry is all about happiness. That is how Percy Shelley, a respected poet, defined poetry. That it is like a record of your happiest times. So when you are happy, you write poetry. You write poetry about the good times. You kiss a lady today, you write poetry. You're in love with a lady, you write poetry. That is how Percy Shelley put his definition of poetry. But you guys know, even without my telling anybody anything, yeah, you guys know that poetry is not always about happiness. There are poems that are written specifically to mourn the dead. Elegies, we call them. Another name, melody. If it is one person, that a song of lamentation by one person, we call it melody. In the oral form, we call it dirge. These are different names for songs of poems of lamentation. Now, Percy Shelley said poetry is about the happiest moments of the happiest mind, the record of the happiest moments of the happiest mind. But what Percy Shelley did not take into consideration is that there are poems that are written to what to mourn the dead. So when you are mourning the dead, can you consider that the happiest moment of the happiest minds? You can't. And this is where I always call Percy Shelley an idiot. He's an idiot. He's a great poet, he's an idiot. Now, when Percy Shelley's friend, John Keats, when he died, what did Percy Shelley do? Percy Shelley wrote an elegy entitled Adonai. Say, oh, weep for Adonai, for he is dead. Now, let's now imagine the stupidity of this man. This man said poetry is about happy people. But now this man is writing a poem where he is mourning the death of his friend. So you can see that irrespective of how respected a poet is, it does not mean that that poet's definition is what is the best. It does not mean that that poet's definition is right. It does not mean that that poet's definition must be used. So please, I understand the fact that people will always want to give scholarly definitions. But nonsense remains nonsense, irrespective of who said it. So you can see, there is no definition of poetry. Of course, you know that Percy Shelley's definition that poetry is about the happiest moments. Do you know that there are some poems that actually reinforce this definition? There are poems that actually reinforce this definition. Imagine poems about happiness. If all the poems you have read are happy poems, you would say, yes, Percy Shelley is right. But diverse moods and tones exist in poetry. The tone could be melancholic. The tone could be nostalgic. The tone could be ecstatic. You get me? The tone could be angry. So different and diverse tones exist. This is why there is no definition of poetry that you will give that is not subject to exceptions. Now, when we say that, I always like quoting Egali Masters. Whenever I mention that poetry does not have a specific definition, and then I mention that every definition is subject to exception, I quote Egali Masters. Yeah, what did Egali Masters say? He said what? No single definition of poetry has ever been made which would not exclude poems of confessed greatness. And many of the definitions include compositions which would not make the poetic appeal. Basically, saying that there is no definition that will not exclude some poems. There is no definition like that. You get me? There is no definition. So let's move on. So look at, we have Carl Sandburg's definition. Carl Sandburg said poetry is the synthesis of hyacinths and biscuits. Most times, every year I teach poetry, I tend to always give different interpretations of Carl Sandburg's definition. So poetry is a synthesis, let's just say combination of hyacinths and biscuits. Hyacinths are like flowers that they place, like flowers they place at the graveside. So let's say hyacinths should represent the morbid. Okay, let's assume hyacinths represent the morbid. That is, hyacinths represent bad, biscuits represent good. So this is that poetry is the what synthesis of hyacinths and biscuits. But the truth is that when you look at when you look at this definition, it does not really tell you much. You get me? It does not really tell you much about the features of poetry. Yes, you do not necessarily learn anything important about poetry. It's just like using what? Using fancy words. You get me? It's like using fancy words just because you want to sound smart. Yes, we do it a lot. We do it a lot. We don't want to sound smart. We just start using fancy words. We say this, we say that. We use words instead of saying confused. We say discombobulated. You get it, like we do all these things just because we want to sound smart. But trust me, there isn't much. You get me? There isn't much that can be done. You get. So Shelley's definition, I've mentioned that about Shelley already, so we can move on. Look at it. Another definition is Emily Dickinson. She said, if I read a book and it makes my whole body feel cold, so no fire can warm me, I know it is poetry. Trust me, Emily Dickinson's definition is beautiful. It's poetic. You get me? It's a beautiful definition, and I'm even calling it poetic. Most times, I should deviate a bit. Sometimes I get called to take special classes. Maybe a tutorial center, a school calls me, and maybe they say, "Oh, come and take literature, come and take poetry." Or maybe a friend invites me to an establishment to have a talk with them on poetry. When I go, I'm telling you guys my secret. When I go and I stand in front of the students, I would always quote Emily Dickinson's definition. Sometimes I close my eyes. I just try to be very dramatic. I say it not because I believe the definition. I say it because the definition is sensational enough. That is what I feel the definition is sensational. Imagine when you go and meet people that probably any small thing they will say deep, deep word. You meet those sort of people, and then you tell them, when I read a book and I feel cold that no fire can warm me, I know it is poetry. They would always try to understand, is there a deeper meaning to this thing? But the truth is that as students of poetry, we cannot necessarily see the distinctive features of poetry from from this definition. It does not tell us about rhymes. It does not tell us about meter. It does not tell us about sound. It does not tell us about figurative language. It just gives us something that sounds poetic. Though a little argument can be made that this definition talks about emotions. Like, so when I read a book and feel cold, no fire can warm me. So the definition tells us that poetry has certain effects on people. The effect that poetry has on people is the effect that nothing else has on people. You see, we are just being very subjective with our description or with our analysis. We're just trying to assume. So it's not easy to define poetry. You get me? It is not easy to define poetry. You get me? So another reason, like I have been saying, I've been talking about how difficult it is to define poetry. Another reason it's difficult is that poetry can literally be seen everywhere. I started this class by telling you guys how poetry is in the Bible. I quoted David's cry. So, let my God do not let those that hate me, or my tears have been my meat day and night. And why those that hate me continually ask, where is thy God? Like, I started this class by showing you that the Bible itself is poetic. David was a poet. So poetry is ubiquitous. Poetry is everywhere. Poetry is everywhere. Mehmed, that's the emperor of modern day Turkey now. I forgot what they used to call it. Modern day Turkey used to be known as I can't remember, but I should remember. Whenever I remember, I'll just post it on the group. So Mehmed was the emperor. He was the one that conquered Constantinople. Mehmed conquered Constantinople. Now it was prophesied by Prophet Muhammad that a warrior would conquer Constantinople. I can't remember the exact word, but it was something like the man that shall take Constantinople, so great his army. That description is poetic. I'm just trying to tell you that poetry is everywhere. You will see poetry even in our religious texts. When Prophet Muhammad predicted the fall of Constantinople, he predicted it in such a poetic way, in poetic language. So you can see poetry everywhere. You can see poetry in land. You can see poetry on the air. You can see poetry in the water. You can see poetry in a little stream that is ebbing gently to confluence with what? With the sea. You can see poetry in the waves that are beating what? That are beating a ship. You can see poetry in that ship that is what doggedly sailing through the tornado. You can see poetry in the eyes of your lovers. I was working on an anthology, and I told you, and a friend of mine, I've been working on this anthology since 2022, and a friend of mine asked me, why had I not finished and published this thing? Because the aim was to publish it. And I told her that I had lost my news. I told her that, oh, the lady I was using as my muse, the lady I was dedicating most of the poems to, we're no longer together, and I no longer have any idea on what to write. So, why am I saying this? You can see poetry in form of a lover. You see a beautiful girl, and she inspires you to write poetry. You see a boy you like, he inspires you to write poetry. Poetry is everywhere. You can even see poetry in painting. This is what Lukács said what? Painting is silent poetry, and poetry is painting that speaks. What does it mean by this? When you look at a painting, there is a message. You get it? When you look at the painting, there is obviously a message. There is a message that the painting is passing across. Similarly, when you look at poetry, there is a message. You get me? When you look at poetry, there is a message. That means this message is not passed across through pictures, rather, the message is passed across through words. From the way the poet uses words, you are able to picture something. When Chibito Onu will say what? And he zoomed and boozed. From the word zoom, you can already picture a car that is what? That is speeding. From the word booze, you can picture what? Onyanogoma, someone that drinks. So, painting is silent poetry. Painting does not talk. But when you look at the painting, you can see what is happening there. Those of you that will do IELTS, if you do it for academic, you will see that one of the writing tests is like a description of a picture. Pictures tell stories. Do you understand me? Pictures tell stories. You don't have to look at the picture and try to understand what is going on. Similarly, poetry does that. But this time, poetry does it using words. So through the use of words, you'll be able to picture things. When Robert Burns will say what? Till all the seas go dry, my dear. Till the rocks melt with the sun, my dear. And I will love thee still, my dear. When he uses this hyperboles, oh, till the seas go dry, till the rocks melt with the sun, I will love you. What is he creating? It's creating an image of undying love. Say, my love, I will love you. Before I stop loving you, the seas have to go dry. Before I stop loving you, all the stones have to what? Have to melt. So poetry speaks, and poetry paints pictures. So when somebody tells you that painting is poetry and poetry is paint and poetry is painting, when somebody equates poetry to painting, you must be confused. But all these things, they do one thing. They tell us that what it is difficult to define poetry because poetry can be anywhere. We can see poetry in painting. In fact, when I was the editor of the shuttle, I when I was editor of the shuttle, I made the I made I did a competition for people to write on poetry and painting, like a convergence of poetry and painting. How poetry can reflect in painting, how painting can reflect in poetry. Poetry is everywhere. We can see it anywhere, even in painting, even in music. You people know Davido's Square Square. Davido and Kizania. I wrote an article on that. Davido's verse on Kizania's Square, where poetry meets music. This article, in this article, I used the anti-metabolic. Music is poetry, poetry is music. I was not telling them that music and poetry are the same thing. Of course, I do not believe the video is an intellectual or anything. But when I was analyzing it, of course, I made the video seem like a debate. When the video shouted, Isataba, show me your batasi, or whatever I said, I interpreted Isataba as, oh, that is allusion. It's making reference to Bakasi. Isataba, yes, Isataba, making reference to Bakasi uprising. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, making reference to what? To the bombing of Japanese cities. So his lover, that's oh, his lover, the effect his lover has on him is what is as poignant as the what as the bombing of these places. What was I just trying to do? I was just trying to show you that poetry could exist in music, meaning that in songs you can see poetic elements. Go and listen to most of the best songwriters. They are poets. You get me? They are poets. Listen to the best of they are poets. You see their thoughts, you see the way things are flowing, and you know that, oh, these people what are good at what they do. So these are some of the reasons it's difficult to define poetry. But even though it's difficult to define poetry, does this mean that we will not define poetry? It's difficult to define poetry, but that does not mean we will not define it. We have to define it. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Please, you guys are no longer in secondary school. You guys are not children. You guys are not babies. In fact, I dare say that you guys are all adults, irrespective of your age. Now, what is expected of you in your writing? This is what made me sad last semester. Last semester, we started by I think I was holding a couple of writing classes, and then somehow we stopped. And when during the exam period, when a couple of you guys sent essays to me, and I looked at these essays, I felt I was so sad. I was so sad because these essays are not university standards. Yes, these essays are not university standards. A department like philosophy will penalize you for writing bad essays. Trust me, if philosophy will penalize you for writing bad essays, English will penalize you more. Do you know what is even funny? Law will also penalize you. Your legal method lecturers will penalize you for writing bad essays. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Please, when you are trying to define things, there is what we call scholarly definitions. Scholarly definitions that are definitions given by what authorities, like somebody that is in the field, an authority in the field. These are the definitions that you should always what you should always take note of. Now, I'm not saying you need to memorize these definitions. That's another mistake a lot of you make. A lot of you think that you need to memorize definitions verbatim. You need not memorize any definition verbatim. Do you get me? You do not need to do that. You just need to what? Note the keywords. You just need to note the keywords. Do you get me? That is how to do it. Because in exams, How many will you remember? Just note the keyword. So let's say we want to define poetry now. We consider poetry is a form of literature that makes use of verse. This is why so and so poets define poetry as what? Art form in verse. What I'm saying is you can just write an essay. When they ask you to define poetry, you can write an essay on what you think poetry is. And in the essay, you will start imputing what? Bits and pieces of different definitions you know. You do not need to what? State every part of a definition. If you can remember everything, no problem, you state everything. You get it. You state everything if you can remember everything. But of course, you will never be able to remember everything unless you are my cross. Possibly some of the lawyers say might be my cross. Because unless you have photographic memory, that's when you should remember everything. So, irrespective of how difficult it is to define poetry, we need to still define it. You get me? Poetry still needs to be defined. And here I have brought a couple of scholarly definitions for you. My favorite definition, the first by Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe says what? Poetry is the redeemable creation of beauty. Trust me, you need to, this is the definition you have to take note of. Because if Professor Anyoku will give you German questions, they will surely say dash is the redeemable creation of poetry, or Edgar Allan Poe define poetry as the redeemable creation of dash. Yes. So note, according to Edgar Allan Poe, poetry is the redeemable creation of beauty. Now, what you will notice in all these definitions is that all these definitions, I highlighted some parts, I emboldened some parts. All these things I emboldened show the what? They show like there was distinctive features of poetry or functions of poetry. So Poe said poetry is the redeemable creation of beauty, which means in poetry there exists rhythm. A poem is not a poem if it does not have what? Rhythm. So Poe tells us that what poetry is the redeemable creation of beauty. When you look at a poem, for instance, your children's poems, my mother, you would see a regular kind of rhythm. Or twinkle to say twinkle, twinkle, little star. You will see that the part to say twin, we take it up. The part to say cool, we take it down. Or in my mouth, I will say who sat and watched. You would notice that rhythm. There are some words we pronounce low. There are some words we pronounce high. There are some words that we whisper. There are some words that we shout. So when you read the entire poem, you know that pattern is maintained. So that what does that pattern do? That pattern creates beauty. It is pleasurable to what? To listen to people singing this poem or people reciting this poem. My pattern has always been to what? To get the students to recite it. Does any student want to recite it for us? My mother, any student? I might be giving free tutorials. I might be giving free lessons like 1 month free tutorials. Who's gonna sing it for us? My mother. Going 1 month free tutorial. Who's gonna sing it for us? Someone with a good voice. So somebody should volunteer. Or you guys do not trust my ability to keep my promises again. Who's gonna sing for us? My mother. Okay, Ngozi is Ziago. Ngozi, sing for us, please.
Who sat and watched my infant head when sleeping on my cradle bed, and tears of sweet affection shed my mother. That's all.
Mhm. Beautifully sung. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, Ngozi, English or law?
Law.
Okay, I already knew you would be from law. People in English tend to have better voices. All right. Thank you very much, Ngozi. All right. Now, you guys heard us sing. You heard us sing beautifully. And what did you notice? Ngozi, please, a minute. Ngozi, can you take it again? Can you take it one more time? I want you to take it slowly. Because I was playing when I said English sing better. Oh.
Okay.
Okay,
Who
take it one more time
sat,
for us.
who sat and watched my infant head
All right, stop,
when,
stop. Stop,
okay.
stop. Now, can you guys notice? Can you guys notice that there are some words that she's dragging and there are some words that she's not dragging? You find out that she starts the first syllable, she doesn't drag it. The second syllable, she drags it. The next syllable, she doesn't drag. Then the next one, she drags. So there is a pattern like down, up, down, up, down, up. That is rhythm. So when a Allan Poe says poetry is the rhythmical creation of beauty, this song epitomizes that because you find out that this song is what is pleasant. It's pleasant to the ears. It was aesthetically pleasant to the ears. Like auditorily pleasant, sorry, pleasant. So from the recitation of this particular poem, you see what exactly what Edgar Allan Poe is talking about. The rhythm and the rhymes. Now let's look at Percy Bysshe Shelley. You know, we already called Percy Bysshe Shelley an idiot for its initial definition, but here he atoned for that mistake. Yeah, Percy Bysshe Shelley says that what poetry is the imaginative arrangement of language, especially metrical language. So when we say imaginative arrangement of language, you know that poetry is the use of language in a way it has not been used before. Christopher Okigbo will say what? Before you, Mother Itoto, naked I stand. Before your watery presence, a prodigal, leaning on an oil beam, lost in your legend. Under your power, wait I on barefoot. Watchman for the watchword at heaven's gate. Out of the depth of my cry, give ear and hearken. Now, Okigbo is basically talking about a penitent, a repentant person, possibly an African who forgot his roots, that has now come back to his roots as a repentant person. But the way he said, why didn't he just say what? I am standing before you naked. Forgive me. He said what? Before you, Mother Idoto, naked I stand. Before your watery presence, a prodigal. What is a prodigal? A prodigal is what? Is somebody that has erred and has come back to what? To what? To repent of his sins. See what? See the way. He said it in such a way that it has not been said. When they say, oh, mommy, I'm here, forgive me, wash me clean. He did not say it that way. He did not say it that way. So it's the imaginative arrangement of language. We use language in such a way that what has not been used before. To say things that have been said before. Every day, people write love poems. People write love poems every day. But the truth is that the best love poems will express all these friends are expressing similar emotions. So I love you, you love me, two of us love each other, blah 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 blah. The poems are expressing these emotions, but there is still going to be something unique about the way each poet says it. I once wrote, "My love is a run-on sentence that goes on and on." You know what a run-on sentence is? A run-on sentence is the kind of sentence that many of you write. It is punishable under grammar. It's the kind of sentence that is so long that you should have what? You should have cut the sentence into smaller bits. The essence of run-on sentence is just it goes on and on and on, not stopping. Now, I am trying to create an image of undying love. You know that I was lying. I was trying to create an image of undying love. What did I say? I said, well, my love is like a run-on sentence. Meaning that it goes, nothing stops it. You understand? Allah for who believes. So, poetry is the imaginative arrangement of language, especially metrical language. When we say metrical language, we are just talking about rhythm. Remember your jam, Abby. Remember your literature and jam. I know many of you were literature champions. Many of you were literature champions in your secondary school. Okay. In secondary school, you learn that meter or rhythm in poetry is marked by meter. So when we're trying to identify meter in poetry or rhythm in poetry, we have to identify meter. Okay. So you can see that Edgar Allan Poe's definition and Percy Bysshe Shelley's are a bit similar. So let's say I am writing an essay on the definition of poetry, and I'll say that one of the distinctive features of poetry is rhythm. Every poem should have a form of rhythm, whether regular or irregular. This is why Edgar Allan Poe defines poetry as what? As the rhythmical creation of what? Of beauty. The importance of rhythm is further emphasized or was further emphasized by Percy Bysshe Shelley when he said what? Poetry is the arrangement of language, especially metrical language. So most times, if definitions are similar, you can use them to talk about the same thing. So these two definitions, they point out to what? To rhythm. They point out to rhythm. You get it? Also, Poe's definition points out to beauty. Please note, the aim of poetry, the ultimate aim of poetry is what? Is captioned in the what? In the Latin phrase util et dulce, meaning utility and delight. What does that mean? Poetry must be useful, that is, it should be able to teach you, that is util, should be able to teach you something. You should learn something of poetry. Poetry should teach you about culture. Poetry should teach you about different things. Poetry should be expressive. It should be educative. Yes. And then poetry should what? Entertain you. You should read a poem and feel entertained. You should read a poem and be happy. You get me? So the aim of poetry is what you feel a dulce, utility and delight. So that delight, how do we get that delight? We get that delight through what is called beauty. And how does beauty manifest in poetry? Beauty manifests in poetry in two ways. Beauty manifests in poetry in two ways. The first, please note, beauty means aesthetics. When we're talking about beauty in literature, we're talking about aesthetics. Now, beauty manifests in poetry in two major ways. The first is what? Expressional beauty. The first is what? Expressional beauty. This is the type of beauty that we create using our figures of speech. When Robert Bond says what? Till all the seas go dry, my dear, and the rocks melt with the sun, my dear, and I will love thee still, my dear. When he uses this hyperbole, exaggeration, it's not called hyperbole. When he uses hyperbole, till the seas go dry, till the rocks melt with the sun, he's creating an image of undying love. So that's beauty, a form of what? Expressional beauty. You get? When Wole say what? In vain your bangles cast charm circles at my feet. I am Abiku calling for the first and repeated time. Must I weep for goats and cowries, for palm oil and sprinkled ash, yams to nostrils and amulets to ash Abiku's limbs? When Wole describes Abiku this way, says, in vain your bangles cast charm circles at my feet. Instead of saying your bangles cast charm circles at my feet again, so in vain your bangles cast charm circles at my feet. I am Abiku calling for the first and repeated time. Look at the use of language. You wonder, in vain, what is in vain? The bangles casting chance circles at my feet. You try to wonder what's happening. These are just, it's just describing rituals. It's describing our local rituals. So I am Abiku calling for the first and repeated time. That means I am coming again, but I am like I'm coming for the first time as a newborn baby. But the truth is that I have been born several times. So calling for the first and repeated time. That's expressional beauty. Beauty through the use of words. Beauty through our work, our figurative expression. Beauty through language. Now, the second beauty is what we call musical beauty. Second beauty is what we call what? Musical beauty. You guys heard Ngozi when she was singing, reciting the poem. That's musical beauty, the kind of beauty we get through rhymes, through what meter, through the sound devices. Yes. When you read a particular poem and it's musical, that is the kind of beauty, that's pleasure we get from what? From the musicality of what? Of the lines. So beauty could be expressional and beauty could be musical. Now, still on musical, John Ruskin said what? Poetry is the presentment in musical form. Look at it. Poetry is the presentment in musical form. So what John Ruskin is trying to tell us is that poetry and music are very similar. Do you know that most of the hymns, if one of the things I love about church service is just the hymns. I think that's the only thing I like about church service, the hymns. A church that uses traditional hymns, I like those kind of churches. When you read this particular or recite this particular hymn, just as I am without one plea, you get, or something like, yes, just as I am without one. When you look at the lines, you find out that it could easily pass off as a poem, as a poem. At the end of every stanza, they say, "What, O Lamb of God, I come, I come." That is repetition, or we call it refrain. And at the end of every stanza, it is repeated. At the end of every stanza, it's repeated. We have so many poems that have this pattern. You guys read "Do Not Go Gently into That Good Night." At the end of every stanza, they either say what, "Do not go gently into that good night," or they say what, "Rage, rage against the dying of the light." So when Ruskin says poetry is presentment in musical form to the imagination of noble grounds and noble emotions, blah blah blah, we just need to take this part of poetry and music. That music is an important aspect of poetry, and this is because poetry is meant to be what, recited. Poetry is meant to be chanted, to be recited, to be sung. You get me? That is what poetry is meant. Now, the Longman Dictionary says what, I think this is the best definition we have here because it tells us a lot about poetry. It says poems are texts in rhythmical form, often employing rhyme and usually shorter and more concentrated in language and ideas than prose or drama. You see, the poems are in rhythmical form. You see that is justifying Poe and Shelley's definition. And then it says often employing rhyme. Now it goes ahead to tell us something. So what? And usually shorter and more concentrated. Now poetry is typically shorter than prose and drama. A good example: the other James Joyce wrote a book entitled Ulysses about Odyssey. James Joyce wrote a book entitled Ulysses about Odyssey. This book had 700. Oh shit! So James Joyce wrote a book entitled Ulysses about the Odyssey. This book had 700 pages. Now, Alfred Lord Tennyson wrote a poem entitled Ulysses. Alfred Lord Tennyson's poem had just 70 lines. So, what it took a novel 700 pages, it took a poem 70 lines. What it took a novel 700 pages to achieve was achieved in 70 lines in a poem. So, poetry is usually shorter than the rest because poetry uses what? A form of condensed language. When Okibo says, uh, before your watery presence, a prodigal, you get it? Before you, Mother Idoto, naked I stand. Before your watery presence, a prodigal. So much can be said about these four lines. So much can be said about these four lines that if I want to write a book about it, I will start by showing that, oh, this particular person has gone around, seen the world, and possibly sinned. Now, this particular person has come back. I would even have to show the journey. This particular person has come back. Now, this particular person has come to ask for your forgiveness, or ask your forgiveness. But all these things in just four lines. Says, before your watch your presence, a prodigal leaning on an oil beam, lost in your legend. So I do not want to. I think I'm already even losing. See, we have more definitions here. A lot of definitions. I will share the material later. There are so many definitions. So all you just need to do is to note that poetry has does not have a specific definition, but it does not mean that we will not define poetry. It does not mean that we will not try to what we will not try to define it. Yes, we're going to try to define it by quoting what real poetic scholars. So those of you that need, you can take a screenshot. You can take a screenshot of this. That's I think that's enough. I believe you should be taking screenshots already. You can take a screenshot of this. Okay. So all right. I should call it a class at this point, but I just need your attention. I should call it a class at this point. Um, Meanwhile, I should be at I was at English orientation. I should be at law orientation if God permits that. Before I move on, is there anybody that has any question? Is there anybody that has any question for me? Is there anybody that has any question for me? If you got a question for me, I wouldn't mind. I want to share my screen for something. If you've got a question for me, I wouldn't mind, please. Anybody? I want to show you guys something. I just want to log in, then I'll start showing my screen. So you won't see my password. Okay. So, any question? Any question? How afraid are you guys? What do you want to know about poetry? Is there anything you want to ask me? I'm available. You can send me a message on WhatsApp. Either is fine. Okay. Very good. So I'll share my screen back. I want to show you guys something. Okay. Yeah. I believe the screen. Yes. Okay. Sharing it back. Good. Okay. Very good. All right. So this is something I want you guys to see. This is the new pattern we'll be using for lectures now. This is not how the student dashboard is, by the way. This is my dashboard because I'm the admin. So when you log into this website, the website is currently free. When you log into this website, you would see your courses, you would see CBT exam, you would see track progress, meaning that this website tracks your reading progress. How well have you read? What have you covered? How many classes have you attended? You get me? Our AIS tracks everything. We track everything through data analysis. So that's one of the features that we're bringing in. Now I haven't yet uploaded anything on your dashboard. Let's look at the courses. So looking at the courses, we have 400 level. This is for the entire semester, by the way. The price is for the entire semester, not the monthly price. So we have 400 level, we have 300 level, we have 200, we have 100 level law, and we have 100 level English. The one that I'm yet to put is 200 level law. So I have put a couple of things in 400 level. I put a couple of things in 400 level. So let's say we enter this class. Let's enter this class. Okay, we have entered the class 400 level. We can see the different classes there, the different courses. We have ENG 320, ENG 321, meaning that let's assume these are law courses. Let's say this is Geo. If you enter this class, now when you click on this class, let me leave the class first. You get. If you click on a particular class, you say, okay, let's enter this. I want to use 400 level. All right, let me use 400 level. So let's say we're in this class now. We click in a particular class like this. Let's say this. Now everything about that class will show on your dashboard. You go to home. Once you go to home like this, you'll see everything about the class. Okay. So if this is a calendar here. The calendar here is like a timetable. It will show you that it will show you if you have classes here. So classes will be scheduled here. So if we have a class, let's say we have a class scheduled for 4 p.m., it's going to be in this place. We have a class scheduled for 4 p.m. Let's just say, let me schedule a class now. Let's just assume I have a class, law, and the outline of the class. I want to teach a definition. I'm going to show you something. I want to teach definition, class description, helping people. Let's just say helping. Get. And let's say link. Okay, this is the Google Form link. Let me just put anything there. So let's schedule the class. What time? Today is Friday 16th. So let's put it Saturday 9:30. Let's just put it there. So if I schedule a class for my dashboard, I schedule the class on my dashboard. All you just need to do is in your own place, you would see in your own place, your dashboard, you will see the class here. This place is loaded. This place loaded, you would see it. And my network is very poor. That's why you can't see at once. So you would see all the fixed classes right here. You get me? You see all the fixed classes right there. And in your dashboard too, you should also be able to see materials, other activities. You see materials. You get me? So this place is we have it under assignments. These are the materials. So in this place, we will upload all the class notes from last section, meaning those that are in 200 and 300 level, you will get their notes from here. And then another place, let's say the second place, will now be available for this semester's notes. You get it? It is going to be uploaded as the lecturers give it. We have already entered into agreement with some students with very good handwriting. Once the lecturers give notes in class, or if the lecturers come to class, we upload everything here, meaning that you're not just getting lectures right now, you're getting access to everything that is being done. So you get previous notes here, you get class notes here, and then you get our materials here. So there are three different type of materials to expect: previous materials, current materials, and Primus materials. Now, there is no how you would use these three materials to read if you are someone that is serious. There is no how you use these three materials to read, attend your classes, and attend tutorials that you will not do well. It is almost impossible to fail unless you just want to fail. It's almost impossible. You get now alongside this, what we will be doing basically maybe those in English that will benefit from this more, possibly those in law too, if we can get access to everything. What we'll also be doing is that we'll be putting links here that will direct you to academic articles. I always tell my students, use ResearchGate, use ResearchGate, use ResearchGate. Many of them don't even know how to navigate all those academic websites. So whenever there is a relevant article, we would always upload it here and you guys will come here to do it. Now, you see this part, there is a part for assignment. See this part for assignment. This part for assignment, whenever we tell you guys to write an essay, I always say, guys, write an essay and submit it to my email. And to be honest, it has always been very difficult for me to keep up. You get, I sometimes I start wondering, have I graded this? Have I not graded this? So let's say I give an assignment. Look at this. Let's say this is the assignment. I give an assignment. The assignment will be uploaded here. You get, the assignment is going to be uploaded on the platform. All you need to do is to go to the platform, see the assignment, do the assignment, and when you have done the assignment, you submit it here. The moment you have submitted the assignment, it is going to appear on your tutor's dashboard. So once your tutor grades your assignment, you see the grade in your student's dashboard. Like I said, you can track your progress. You can see, oh, this is what I got in the first test, this is what I got in the second test, this is what I did, this is what I did. You get. You can track your progress. Also, this is another feature we have. Like I said, this is the admin dashboard. So some features that you will see for students, you won't see them here. Another feature we have is the one is CBT. We have the CBT feature. It's somewhere around there, not on this particular dashboard. So courses that are most likely to receive OBJ, we would upload all the questions there alongside the answer, so you can always practice this thing at your leisure time. You can always practice this at your leisure time. So it's basically we are basically bringing everything to you guys. You don't need to like buy notes from anybody anymore. You don't need to pay anybody for links or anybody for materials. All you just need to do is to be on this platform. Once you're on this platform, you get access to class notes, you get access to Primus notes, you get access to previous notes, and you get access to what relevant materials. And the best part of it all is that your progress will be tracked. So I implore you guys to take this opportunity to utilize this platform. Thank you guys so much for joining in. We will hold more free classes in the coming week. My name remains Dozier, and I am happy you guys joined. Thank you. The replay is going to be available.
Thank you, sir.